I was thinking of coming back to you about Afghanistan 1 year. We spoke
Yeah.
a bit last year, and things are still going through lots of serious situation. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the statistics I'm looking for, like it says like 90% people are struggling with their food security. I mean, that's huge. I mean, 90%. And I think the women are still not allowed to go back to the schools. That's another thing. Still not sure that what's going to happen on that. Um, and the economy is obviously the economy works when the Western governments, are okay with that particular country. It looks like the Western government is kind of, away from the whole thing now. So money is not coming, but also the problem is, I think during the last couple of years, the Afghanistan government invested some money around the world, and now the Western government put a freeze on those accounts. So it's Afghanistan's money. They will not have access to those money either. So we are talking about, there's nothing there, and then this is the situation, and the world is just, we are out. So where to start? So what's your, like, because you are very close to that place. So I think your senses are much more sharper from what we are watching or seeing or reading.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as you know, that there are lots of actually restrictions on media, so we hardly get news from Afghanistan, but I meet people and I ask like Afghani people, and I ask the same question. I mean, what is happening there? So what I feel, there are some mixed news actually coming from. There are certain areas where we can think, that it's good. For instance, one of the most important thing in Afghanistan, if you read the history, is that hardly we have seen like a centralized government, a centralized established authority. So if you read the articles, for instance, after the fall of Kabul, so one thing you can see that the government has actually established that central authority. That has also helped actually to bring peace in Afghanistan. If you see, for instance, the bomb blast or other attacks, terrorist attacks have actually reduced significantly after the US withdrawal. But there are some like bad pictures, actually bad news coming from Afghanistan, as you mentioned, that 90% of the people are actually not getting their daily food. And is promised by the Taliban that they would actually allow girls to get education and allow women actually to work. So these things are again not happening. In addition to that, we know that they have also imposed restriction on freedom of expression. They are not actually allowing the voices, allowing people to raise voices against their government. So there's a kind of mixed, what I can see, reports, actually coming from Afghanistan. Some of these things you can say it's fine. I think if you keep in mind the history of Afghanistan, but on the other side, you can see that these things are not fine. Especially girls' education, women rights, women right to job, and the other things.
These are good points you mentioned about, like the way Afghanistan we knew, even during the, US governments, all the Western governments were there last 20 years. It seems like last 1 year is a kind of, there's a sense of calmness there. There's no like, bomb blasts every day, like killings there, the pockets of fightings going on, non-stop. those things suddenly gone off, do you think there is some kind of close to 100% control by the Taliban government centrally?
Well, I think for a short term, I mean, they can have this like 100% control, but is one of the flaw. I mean, we can see that they don't have actually defined kind of political system. They are basically saying that the system is based on Islamic law and Afghan values. But the problem is, I mean, if you see, so there is no, as I said, I mean, the political system is under-specified, or under-theorized, so no defined political system. So what I think, unless and until they have that defined political system, kind of constitution, where everything is defined actually, which defines the function of state, for instance, what would happen if the government, like the system we have actually in developed world in other parts of the country. So establishing that 100% control would not be possible. Through coercion, for instance, they can have that control, but not for a long time, unless people have access to the basic provisions of life, for instance. They are free to express themselves. Women have rights to job, and girls have right to education. So all these things are, I mean, the basic things enshrined in the modern constitution, for instance. If they are not actually, if they fail to provide all these things, so they won't not be able actually to have that 100% control. So without legitimacy, I mean, they cannot rule Afghanistan for a long time.
And especially when they have got no support from the outside, because
exactly.
I mean, to run a country, you need money, you need resources, you need diplomatic support. I mean, it's like suddenly, like Afghanistan is out of the civilization somewhere else. And no one is thinking much about that. We saw some kind of 1-year anniversary and all the news media they did last couple of days and talking about how bad is Afghanistan is now. But the problem is they don't explore much what's going on the ground, but also they don't have much info either, because it's a closed country this way, that way. And that's quite frightening as well. The structure we know around the world, the normal structure, that the country has got some kind of leadership, some kind of, they're like, all those divisions, all those hierarchies and structure, like who's in charge of this, like province, those things are, no one knows what's going on there.
You're absolutely, I mean, currently the biggest challenge for them is actually to how to evolve a system which encompass their cultural values, which also contains like Islamic laws, for instance, but which is not so harsh like they had it back in 1990s, so that should also be acceptable to the West, for instance. So I think that's the biggest challenge. And one good thing, I was just reviewing some of the literature, is that unlike past, when they would just issue and enforce orders through coercive power, for instance, this time they have made and established committees, to evolve a kind of consensus, which is a good thing, I think, which is a democratic thing. In addition to that, I mean, the other biggest challenge, as you said, is that to collect revenue, to generate revenues, because we know that 75% of the Afghan economy was dependent on foreign aid. So when that foreign aid actually stopped, the people simply just had no food to eat. Their economy just, suffered immense losses. So they are one thing which is also linked with the centralized authority is that through taxation and revenue, they have raised 840 million dollars between December 2020 and June 2022. So almost in these 6 months, but still they really need much more than that. But if they succeed actually, which is again very big challenge to collect revenue, and feed the Afghan people. So in addition to establishing a centralized authority, so I think that could lead to a stable Afghanistan simply.
It's a big country, 40 million people. In the modern society, the states are connected with each other. The banking system, especially,
Exactly.
So, I mean, you need to do the trade, but the problem is if the banks are not allowed to participate in the global economy, then how? I mean, it's a difficult situation on the ground, and it's very unfair to the people of Afghanistan. They suffered so many years. Now, they came back here in 2001 and then 20 years, and then they left. And now we are talking about it just like going back to the point zero again and then restart. I mean, the injustice is the first word come to my mind. I mean,
if you remember, we talked a lot about this point that if the Western world, for instance, they want to bring a certain kind of change, and they start comparing the Afghan society with the Western society and compare the women's rights, change overnight would not simply come in Afghanistan. So what we talked about, that they should actually help push the Afghan government, the Taliban government, to ensure all these rights. But unfortunately, if you remember, the Russia-Ukraine crisis actually. So all the media, if you remember, they just stopped talking about Afghanistan, the crisis they had. So yeah, this is again, I would say that some of these things they should actually link, for instance, the foreign aid with the provision of women's rights, for instance, with the girls' education. But again, as we talked earlier, that the biggest challenge is actually to break this gap between their interpretation and manifestation of Islamic law and with the modern political system. A proposal was sent actually to the Amir al-Mu'mineen, by the Shura to allow actually girls to get education. And similarly about the women's rights to job, but he refused to sign it. That no, we cannot, allow this. I cannot allow this because it's not permitted in Islamic law. So then, as I said, then there is Afghan values, and then they have to actually satisfy the Western countries, the neighboring countries. So evolving a kind of political system which satisfy not only their members, for instance, the Taliban, and the Afghan people, and the external world, neighboring countries in Europe. It's really, I think, Herculean task. But one thing, I think, a ray of hope is that the system is evolving. As I said, if you compare it with the previous rule of the Taliban, so there are certain things which did not happen, back in 1990. But still, there is a lot to be done, as we talked about.
Especially, but at the same time, if you're talking about it will evolve, but the problem is to evolve even, you need time, and to have that time, you need to sustain as well. So that means, you just cannot have time without food, So if you run a country for 1 year, it needs money, it needs resources. And if you ask the government to evolve without giving anything, then how the government will pay for all those basic services, even just salaries for the people, for the police, for the doctors. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me, and it's quite frustrating. At the same time, we're talking about 40 million people's lives are seriously at risk. I mean, in a harm's way, and they did some 1-year anniversary and then saying really bad thing about Afghanistan, and then says that, yeah, what can you do? I mean, and the other thing is, like, one of the neighboring country who historically always helped Afghanistan financially, politically, and all those things. So Pakistan is not in a stable situation either because of the political thing that's going on right now. So how you see things, I mean, because now another problem for Afghanistan is the support they need, the usual support, that's also not 100%. What kind of future scenario you are thinking of, next couple of months?
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the good things is, as I was mentioning, the centralized authority. In addition to that, I mean, one thing is that in this crisis, Pakistan did not face that huge influx of Afghan refugees. So back in Soviet-Afghan War, Pakistan received almost 4 million refugees. Pakistan is still hosting 1.4 million. But after the Taliban took over, actually in August 2021, Pakistan only received 0.3 million Afghan refugees. So that was the impact of Taliban takeover on Pakistan. Yeah, you're right that Pakistan shares a long border with Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a brotherly country. It shares the same, especially the province I live in, they share the same culture, language, race, and ethnicity. But as you said, that Pakistan is actually facing its own crisis. Its economy is not in the position actually to extend support to Afghanistan, which also increases the predicament of Afghanistan. On one side, its neighboring countries are actually not helping Afghanistan. On the other side, you see that its fund was actually frozen, and the international community is actually not helping Afghanistan. So where you can see that 90% of the people are actually suffering from poverty, and they don't have their daily food. So the result, I mean, the outcome is simply there, and we can see what is happening if we, Pakistan, for instance, and the Western world do not support Afghanistan.
And the problem is, I mean, if things are not going well for a certain time, then Afghanistan can go back to the same thing again, civil war situation and the ethnic, all those things happened in the past. And I know that there's 20% Hazara population, isn't it? The Shia.
Yeah.
The 20% is quite a large number as well.
Yeah.
So when the resource is in crisis, then these things can flare up seriously.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, if you don't have actually money to feed people, that would obviously lead to instability. And that would actually pave the way for, as we discussed in the previous discussion, for another group, for instance, the biggest challenge, security challenge for the Afghan Taliban is the Islamic Khorasan group, So for instance, if they are externally supported, they would be in a position actually to recruit people. I mean, if they are in a position, for instance, if the organization is financially stable, externally supported. So obviously, I mean, then people would tend to join their ranks actually instead of joining the Taliban, you know. Yeah, that can simply lead to another crisis. He said, I mean, it can lead to the emergence of new hardcore extremist groups, you know, which we have seen actually back in 1990. You know.
Ayman al-Zawahiri was taken out by drone, and America, they treat them as big achievements, you know, whether this guy is still capable of doing anything. And Biden government was trying to, you know, click points for that. That's like the Western kind of idea about how to deal with Afghanistan. You go there time to time, you know, with drones, with F-16, and then bomb something, and then give your audience, that, you know, domestic audience, that, you know, we are in charge, you know, we are taking care of it, you know, there'll be no harm coming from them, but don't worry about Afghanistan. You know, the way we teach politics, you know, international relations, it's quite a bleak picture, isn't it? So the people, the normal people, the ordinary people, I mean, no one talks about their lives.
No, you're right. Yeah, I mean, the way they see things, you know, from there, I mean, it's quite different, you know, here. Of course, I mean, Ayman al-Zawahiri was like a big achievement. But the problem is that whether killing of Ayman al-Zawahiri would have kind of effect on Al-Qaeda as an organization, you know. We know about the extremist organization that if like killing off their head hardly have any effect if the organization, the number of organization is more than like 500. And if it is 10 years old, you know, so there, this is like one research study actually finds that. I don't know. I mean, whether that would make any difference on the operation of Al-Qaeda or not. I think pushing Afghanistan is the Taliban is the promise that they would actually not allow any organization to use the land of Afghanistan for like external terrorism. So that would, I think, help instead of, I mean, I think using drones and killing people, because we know that collateral damages also contribute to militancy and extremism, you know.
Your province is huge border with Afghanistan. Is there any sense of things there? Like, you know, the people movement, people are leaving the country. Is there anything like that? Or the border is very fluid. People can go, come back, you know. Can you give us some kind of idea that what kind of border?
No. I mean, currently, I mean, the border is, according to the government estimate, 90% of the border is fenced actually. Okay. So yeah, but there are borders. I mean, like the one in our province, I mean, that's called Turham border, and one is actually Quetta. So now it's, I mean, really difficult to like cross the border without having you know, legal documents. The 0.3 million people, refugees which came after the Taliban takeover of Kabul, so 0.1 million people had were having actually valid visa. So the other 0.2 million were actually allowed, but they would also ask that you need to apply for visa, you know. So currently, I mean, it's cross-border movement is not that easy, you know, because as I said, the border is fenced. So,
I mean, how long the border is? We are talking about. I mean, you cannot fence 3,000 mile long border.
Yeah, it's 2,600 kilometers. Yeah, probably, or 2,400 kilometers. Yeah, it's long, but
and like 90% has got fence.
Yeah, this is what the government says. Yeah, that 90% has been fenced,
I mean, that's another problem, isn't it? Because if there's a serious crisis in Afghanistan, people cannot actually leave.
Yeah, I mean, I think 3 or 4 months back, so there were some incidents which happened because the issue is that Afghanistan does not recognize this border, so they don't recognize this as an international border. So one of the Taliban groups, I mean, they actually engage in a cross-border firing. So they said, I mean, to the security personnel that we do not recognize this border, so don't come near the border, But that thing was actually then resolved. So that is, as you said, I mean, different, not a different, but another big issue, between Afghanistan and Pakistan.
It looks like what Afghanistan's government, because I mean they're obviously under-resourced, so they're not worried about the border. It's like other countries' responsibility to.
Yeah, you're right. They say, I mean, as I said, they do not recognize it. Even back the Taliban government in 1990, which is still alleged it was supported by Pakistan, so they even did not recognize the border, that's a big problem, as I said.
Because that's the historical problem rather than contemporary problems. That's like kind of colonial history, and they have got big border with Iran as well.
Afghanistan. Both Afghanistan and Pakistan share border with Iran. Pakistan shares, I think, around 840 kilometers probably. I'm not sure about the length of Afghanistan border with Iran, but they both share with Iran.
So I mean, you can see the neighborhood, like Iran, a couple of Central Asian countries, which are also very unstable, and Afghanistan in the pocket. I mean, you cannot think about, what's going to happen. And then if Pakistan is not stable enough to look after itself, then, it can go seriously in a bad situation. Can you see any positive thing coming for like short-term, long-term Afghanistan's political situation?
The good thing is that we have kind of peace, I mean, there. I think peace is the first and foremost requisite of stable economy. And I wish and I hope that Afghanistan has, strong economy. It has good relations with international community, and they also support them. Personally, I'm an optimist. I think these things, I mean, the international community should push them actually to ensure the provision of women's rights and girls' education, all these things. They should allow freedom of expression. But I think, as we discussed, I mean, that it would take little time, change like overnight or in 1 year. Afghanistan has, suffered a lot, since the last 30, 40 years. I mean, it is, so we can hope for the best. I wish and I hope that they evolve kind of political system which not only satisfy the internal Afghan people, but also the international community. That is the biggest challenge. So I wish they succeed in that.
Two things here, like one is like the Taliban government, and the other thing is like 40 million people on the ground. So the outside world who really want to, help. I think they have to decide that which one they really want to help. But the problem is, if they want to help the 40 million people, they have to go through actually Taliban. So there's no other way, you see. So you have to find that strategic position where you can make some kind of balance if you really have that goodwill for the ordinary people who are suffering and who will suffer. So we don't know how you kind of play that balance. But also like Taliban government and this group of soldiers over the years, they are not afraid of any retribution. They are used to this. They're quite hardened over the years, so they're not afraid that they'll be bombed again. They're used to this. No, nothing can deter them that if you don't do it, we'll bomb. I mean, that thing will not work with them, No. So the West has to understand that, that cultural understanding about this group of people. And now they're in charge, and it showed their resilience. It showed their, collective strength. And that's the default position in like Afghanistan's political history, last 30 years. So you have to find way if you really want to help the people. But at the same time, if you don't want to help the people, then don't bother. Don't care anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you.
I know like this is like difficult thing, so because I mean all the media I've been watching last couple of days about 1 year anniversary, it's a very bleak picture they portrayed, and then blamed everything on this group of people. They are evil people and all those things, but no one talked about the people on the ground, 40 million people. How to help them, if you don't like those evil people like Taliban, fine, but do something about the 40 million people, or allow them to come, move out from their country, help them.
I mean, I just talked to like one of the gunmen before this interview, so like half an hour ago. So I asked the same question: what is the situation there? So he told me the same thing, that everything is fine apart from like the economy. So people are actually suffering from poverty. So this is the only problem we are currently having. You're right. I mean, but the problem is that world is not actually realizing the intensity of the situation.
Votre toast, je peux vous le rendre, Seigneur, Seigneur, car avec les soldats, il est